Very well said. Thank you. I also wanted to ask you, because your schedule must be just incredibly busy. I mean, I know it is, especially holding dual positions, also in Montreal, I believe, as the director
Yes.
there. And I had the opportunity, I met your beautiful family the other night, and I was wondering how you managed to sort of maintain a balance between family life and your professional one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question, because particularly in our profession as musicians, as conductors in particular, we have a rather bad reputation for stable family life. I think in the performing arts, the life expectancy of a family is pretty limited. But sometimes people can be very lucky, and in my case, just by luck, by wonderful chance, we've been blessed with a wonderful family. Yeah, somehow it worked the first time. The family has now been together for over 20 years, so that's a long time within our performing arts tradition. The balance, I think, comes from the fact that my wife was raised as the daughter of a diplomat and the daughter of an international business community. And within that, she learned early on to deal with constant moving, to deal with needing to speak many languages at the same time, to deal with having to be formally presentable, and at the same time, behind that formal presentation, to keep the private life separate. Mm-hmm. And all of that traveling and all of that constant necessity to be performing, in a sense, formally performing. She grew up within this structure, and then she thought it was normal ever since she was a child. So therefore,
of course, my life should be like this.
When she became a performing pianist, because she's a concert pianist, and all of the travel takes place, there was not a need to try to strive for some Hollywood lifestyle. Mm-hmm. The lifestyle that she grew up in was constantly varied, constantly demanding, with enormous pressure for high performance at all times, and with the need to move the family base every 2 or 3 years, every 5 years. So the fact that she's an accomplished musician and also comes from this background, I think has, in our case, helped a lot, because since a conductor does live this itinerant lifestyle and pretty much is as much married to his or her orchestra as they are to the family, it helps to have a partner who thinks that this is normal,
yeah.
not abnormal.
And I guess also if she's in the arts as well, that she appreciates also the magnitude of what you're doing. I mean, yes. It seems like if you would have to also explain that part of it to somebody, it would be quite difficult to understand the importance of the arts. And
even more than that, she's, I would say she's the most difficult and hardest critic on my work, and vice versa. Within a family, if the family is a healthy one, then there's a fundamental trust that you can be as harsh and critical as you want, because of course you're thinking about the partner. Mm-hmm. So in our case, yes, I mean, what I read in the newspapers is nothing compared to what I hear at home in terms of criticism.
So I guess you're never afraid to read the reviews.
Well, because the family can say things that no one else can say, and that's an essential part of evolution and growing. An artist cannot grow unless you learn from criticism, from feedback, from somehow looking in a mirror or having a teacher or something. You need a constant criticism to feel your way, how to navigate an evolution forward. I think that's probably why so few artists really rise to the challenge of becoming a master in their late years. Many of us enjoy a wonderful development period, a period of, if we are very, very lucky, of a certain amount of renown. But very few artists actually reach the highest level. For whatever reason, maybe not enough talent, or not enough motivation, or not enough energy. And sometimes it's because there's not enough, so to say, criticism in the healthiest sense of the word. It's an essential part about growing to realize that you can never reach perfection. That's the paradox in the arts. But unless you're striving for perfection, then you'll stop growing.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite piece of music to conduct?
I perform usually several nights every week, and my favorite piece has to be the work that I'm conducting that evening. So tonight I conduct Daphnis and Chloe and the piano concerto for the left hand of Ravel. So for this particular moment, these are my two favorite pieces. But tomorrow it'll be Tristan and Isolde. Last week it was Lohengrin. A few days before that it was Saint François d'Assise. And we feel very privileged, we performing artists, to have such a rich repertoire. Also in ballet you have such a rich repertoire. Part of it is that our artistic tradition, our performing tradition is so deep, hundreds and hundreds of years now, that it's given a very, very rich and wealthy, substantial repertoire. On the other side, it's a part of our responsibility as artists to make sure that that repertoire keeps growing. That means we have to keep performing new pieces in the hopes that someday they will join the repertoire as well. So the idea of a favorite piece is one that's very much tied to our full repertoire. If you were to ask, what is it that I play at home at a moment when I just have some free time, some time when the family's not there, just all by myself studying, it would probably be the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. That's normally when I'm just by myself, and I go to the library and pull down a volume of music just to play for myself. It usually is Bach that I play.
You feel the most maybe connection to this one?
Bach is, for me, a very special composer. Always there. Certainly not the only one, but seems to be the composer that I normally go back to if I have some free time.
Which I doubt is very often.
It's not that often.
I wanted to ask you, what is the most important lesson you've learned in life so far, and if maybe from that experience that you've had, what you might offer to other aspiring artists as advice?
We've talked a lot about them already in this interview. We've spoken about the importance of nature and understanding nature and how it applies to the art form. All of our natural humanistic tendencies are formed by the nature around us. The idea of drama, theater, love, violence, freedom, harmony, balance, movement, gravity. All of these are very, very much tied to the aesthetics that we find within nature around us. So if somehow there's a disconnect between an artist and nature, then there is a fundamental flaw. There's an inability to really comprehend what lies behind the composer's intentions or the choreographer's intention. If you can't understand how gravity works, it's very difficult to understand the aesthetic of working in counterpoint with gravity.
Yeah.
It's really true. You don't understand how a feather falls, how an orange falls, or how the energy of an arc, when you throw a ball into the air, it's impossible to understand the aesthetics of movement, because there is no movement without the force of friction and gravity. And that means that we have to have a very active and regular connection with the environment around us, which is to say, nature. That is an essential part to spend time thinking about and to re-nourish it again and again. I think that was a lesson that fortunately I learned early on. That was one of the good things of coming from the middle of nowhere. In that there is a lot of nature around, and your entire formation as a child grows up with some sort of relationship with a very violent landscape around you. In our case, it was pretty violent. Wild animals could lose your life. A sea that claimed the lives of swimmers every year. Sharks, raging rivers, mountains, very, very dangerous mountains. So that kind of drama one can learn very, very easily and organically if you just spend time in nature. I think the other lesson that I learned is that as hard as you practice, as hard as you study in the conservatory years, it's nothing compared to how hard you must practice and study once you become a professional. And the further you go as a professional, the more you have to study, not the less. That's something that is really critical lesson to learn early on. If for some reason you ever stop practicing, or if you ever stop studying, then a number of things happen. One, you lose touch with the most active sense of discovery is, and discovery is a part of creation. And the second is that your skills begin to get slow and they erode. You only keep your skills alive if they're developing. The moment they stop to develop, they don't sit still, they actually start going the other way, they start decaying. So that lesson is better to learn early on than later on, because if you wait too long, actually, your skills can erode to the point where they're no longer useful to be on the front edge of the performing arts. And the third lesson that I learned is that it is important to have for an artist anyway, to have a balance away from the time that you're spending on stage. That balance means either work in the studio, an interest in other activities, because even though those other activities may be far removed from the life on stage, they contribute towards ideas, they contribute towards inspiration for what appears on stage. That can take a form of a family, it doesn't have to. It can take a form of a passion for literature, it can take a form of simply enjoying interacting with other parts of society. But somehow we as artists, we need to have our reservoir of energies and creativities always full. I think every artist at a certain point in their career will arrive at a point where they're performing so much that there is a risk that they'll become dry somehow. That when you want to reach back into the reserve of energy and inspiration, that somehow you realize that somehow the reservoir is shallow. And the only way to make sure that we stay very, very vital is to make sure that we're constantly replenishing, taking the time to replenish that reservoir of inspiration. And that comes from activities balanced away from the stage. Simply giving all of the time can be very dangerous. So those are the 3 points that I think come to mind.